politics of the European Union regarding the dairy sector have changed. In the future, the milk market will be more and more confronted with crises. This will have heavy consequences for the European Union as a region of milk production. These crises will jeopardize the capacity to maintain milk production in many regions and areas of the European Union. That will reduce the competitiveness of the dairy sector as a whole. The closing down of many farms will affect the whole rural area. Loss of employment and depopulation will be characteristics of this development. A healthy dairy sector, on the other hand, implies a lot of positive consequences. Healthy milk of good quality for the consumers, the preservation of employment, and fair conditions of milk production. To have such situation in the European Union, it's inevitable to anticipate and avoid crisis. The Market Responsibility Programme is a program to identify and avoid crisis in the dairy sector. The concept only applies if there's a crisis on the horizon. At all other times, no measures will be taken. So, what is this Market Responsibility Programme, also called MRP, exactly? How does it work in detail? How can the MRP avoid crisis in the dairy sector? Zita van Keimpema, the Vice President of the European Milk Board, the European Association for Dairy Farmers, explains the MRP in detail.
It's the Market Responsibility Programme, a very important program in a so-called free market in dairy where we are going to. It's a program that only is acting when there is a crisis in the milk market, so when prices of milk are really getting low for the producers. And the objective of this program is to avoid crisis in a three-phase program. At first you need to know what is cost price, what is really a crisis. So define a crisis, and we want to do that with a market index. And this market index enables us to anticipate on crisis. The index compromises the trend in product quotations, milk prices and production costs, so margins. If the index is over 100, production costs are covered and the market is stable, so you don't need to take any action. But it could be that the index falls beyond this 100 threshold, and so you can say the costs are no longer covered. If the shortfall is too big or too long, you have to start this market responsibility program with the early warning. And the early warning is coming if the index falls with 7.5%. Then you have a lot of promotion of private storage you can do. You can have incentive programs to increase sales. And this you continue until the index returns to 100. But it also could be it's an even bigger crisis and the index goes back by 15%, even though the early warning. Then you can say you have a crisis. If the prices fall with 15%, you do have a crisis. And then the Market Responsibility Program is activated. It means that you first define again a reference period. Then you have to have a restraint on supply. You could that voluntarily, and you could have it mandatory. But first we say it's voluntarily, and farmers who will participate will get a bonus at the end. The market responsibility levy will be from the first kilo of milk that a farm increases production. Because if you are a farmer and you do not react to this crisis, to the fact that the market responsibility program is started and you have heard there is a crisis, you don't react, you say I produce more, then you personally make the crisis even worse. So you have to pay a penalty at the end. The index falls even by 25%, then you have a really big crisis, and then you get the universally applicable reduction in the milk supply. So every farmer then has to reduce his production. Well, what are the advantages of the market responsibility program? With this program you can prevent a collapse of farm gate prices, because there is something that you can do. We all know that crises are there because of overproduction, more production than demand. So you have to work on the production, but you cannot do something so quickly about demand. We see that now with the Russian ban. There are a lot of countries involved through this Russian ban, and they are not able to get demand just at an instant. The crisis can be overcome quickly with little state funding. The administrative costs for this program are manageable, and the data already available is sufficient to let the market responsibility program work properly, because there is a lot of data that is already there for us. The concept relies heavily on milk producers behaving in a manner appropriate to the market circumstances. Every dairy farmer, every milk producer now has to look at what does the market want. If you expand but you haven't looked if there is more demand, then you are not really an entrepreneur. Then you are not really doing what you should do. You should look at the market, and if there is more demand, you should produce. If there is not demand, you shouldn't produce. So with this concept, and also the fact that it could cost money if you produce in a time that it's not necessary, it's not wanted, you will get a closer look on the market. So the market responsibility program could give our governments, our policymakers, the instrument that they need. Well, if you are a milk producer, you all know the benefits of a fair milk price, of a fair milk sector. But a fair sector is not something that we have in an instant. We need instruments, we need programs, we need a good policy that makes crisis smaller, react to crisis, etc. We need our farmers, our milk producers, to look at the market, to be very attentive, to know what they are doing, produce when necessary, cut back when it's also necessary, because a market does not only develop higher and higher and higher, it also could mean a setback. If you do not react, you will pay the cost. And with this program, we can make only the people pay who make the problem worse. And everybody that is really trying to make the crisis as small as possible and as short as possible, they will be helped with a bonus from this same program. We need to work together, especially in a liberated market, because we do not have a lot of instruments yet. Crisis instruments are necessary to manage the market, and we can manage the market. So that's why we plead for the market responsibility program. It's the only way we can go in a new market.